Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today, we're talking about Stack Overflow. Picture a developer in the late summer of 2008. He's stuck on a small, maddening problem. He needs a regular expression that can pull a URL out of a block of text, but one smart enough not to snag the period at the end of a sentence. This is the kind of problem every programmer has faced. Usually it means opening a browser, searching, and wading through half-answers on scattered forums. This developer does something different. He goes to a site he just built with his co-founder. He starts typing his question. And before he even finishes typing, the site shows him the answer. Someone had already asked the exact same question. In less than a day, 4 answers were already posted, the community had already voted, and the best one was sitting right at the top. The developer was Joel Spolsky. The site was Stack Overflow. And that tiny moment, a founder being served by his own product before he even needed to ask, is the whole story in miniature. Over the next decade, Stack Overflow would become the place where the world's developers went to solve problems. More than 100 million visitors a month at its peak, a business that sold to the investment group Prosus. In 2021 for $1.8 billion. But the real story here isn't just a great product landing at the right time. It's a masterclass in something much harder, solving the cold start problem. How do you get a community platform off the ground when, on day one, there's nobody there? Stack Overflow's answer wasn't a product trick. It was a marketing decision made years before the product existed. Let's start with the problem Stack Overflow was actually built to fix. Before 2008, if you were a developer with a question, your options were bad. Usenet had faded. What remained was a scattered mess of web forums, noisy, inconsistent, hard to search. Into that vacuum stepped a site called Experts Exchange, and it came to dominate the space with a business model that was, frankly, hostile to the very people it served. Here's how it worked. Experts Exchange let Google index the full text of its questions and answers. That meant its pages ranked well in search results. So a developer would search their error message, click the top link, and land right on what looked like the answer. Except it wasn't free. The real content was obscured, and a paywall sat between the developer and the solution. An annual subscription just to see what they'd already found through a free search engine. Frustrated users hit that wall again and again. They'd grumble, close the tab, and go back to Google to keep hunting. That kind of friction, repeated across millions of developers, is exactly the sign of a market waiting to be disrupted. Joel Spolsky saw the opening. He'd also seen firsthand how valuable developer job listings could be. So the idea crystallized. Build something genuinely free, genuinely useful, and monetize it on the back end through job ads, not by locking the front door on the very people you're trying to serve. Now, ideas are cheap. What made Stack Overflow different was how deliberately it was designed and who built it. Early in 2008, Jeff Atwood pitched Spolsky on an idea, quitting his job to blog full-time. Spolsky counterpitched something bigger, a developer Q&A site. Atwood signed on, brought in developers Jeff Dalgas and Jared Dixon, and the team built the first version of the site in about 20 weeks. From day one, there was a governing principle, and it was almost ruthless in its clarity. Stack Overflow was not going to be a discussion forum. Forums are conversational. They wander. They're full of dead ends and half-finished threads. The founders wanted something closer to an encyclopedia, a tightly curated, high-signal repository of programming knowledge. That produced the defining thesis of the whole product. Optimized for the thousands of people who will later search for this answer, not the one person asking the question right now. Sit with that for a second, because it's a genuinely unusual design choice. Most Q&A products are built to serve the asker. Stack Overflow was built to serve the future reader, the person who hasn't even hit the problem yet, who will Google their error message 8 months from now and land on a page that already has the answer, cleanly written, already voted on by the community. To pull that off, the team borrowed proven mechanics from elsewhere on the web and combined them in a new way. Tagging came from Flickr and del.icio.us, a way to organize content without splitting it into isolated silos. And a reputation system, inspired by Reddit and Slashdot, did something more important than most gamification layers ever manage. Points weren't just a badge. They unlocked real power, the ability to edit questions, close duplicates, delete weak content. In effect, Stack Overflow outsourced its own quality control to the community. What looks like a game mechanic was actually a scalable operations strategy. The best users became an unpaid moderation workforce, and they did it because status, once it's tied to real authority, is one of the most durable motivators there is. Now here's the part of the story that gets flattened into myth. The comfortable version goes, Stack Overflow built a great product, launched at the right time, and organic growth did the rest. The truth is more interesting and more instructive. Stack Overflow's rise wasn't organic, it was engineered, and the engine was an audience-first marketing strategy that started years before the company existed. Before either founder wrote a line of code for this product, they already held one of the rarest assets in business: large, trusting audiences. Spolsky wrote Joel on Software, one of the most widely read blogs in the software industry. Atwood wrote Coding Horror, which had its own devoted following. Neither man built a product and then went looking for users. They spent years building an audience first, earning its trust, and only then launched a product aimed squarely at that audience's pain point. When Stack Overflow opened its doors, the founders didn't need to buy traffic or beg for attention. They pointed a fire hose of built-in targeted readers straight at the new site. Tens of thousands of page views on day one, driven almost entirely by blog mentions from two people readers already trusted. That's not luck. That's importing years of earned credibility and cashing it in at exactly the right moment. By doing that, they skipped the single hardest problem in building any community platform, the chicken and egg problem. A Q&A site with no questions and no answers is worthless. Nobody wants to be first. Stack Overflow never had that awkward empty room phase because the room was full before the doors even opened, and they went one step further, turning the act of building the product into a marketing channel of its own. Spolsky and Atwood recorded their weekly planning calls, real conversations about the site's design, its rules, its architecture, and released them as a podcast. Listeners heard the debates, the disagreements, the reasoning behind every decision before any of it existed. That built-in public approach did three things at once. It generated anticipation, it surfaced early feedback from exactly the audience the product was for, and it gave that audience a sense of ownership before they'd even created an account. Once the community was seated, the architecture of the product itself took over as a growth engine. Every answer on Stack Overflow was licensed under Creative Commons and structured to resolve a highly specific technical question. That made the site an SEO powerhouse. Every problem a user solved became a new, high-ranking landing page. A door standing open on Google, waiting for the next developer who hit the exact same error message. Think about what that means strategically. The product wasn't just useful. It was, quietly, its own most effective acquisition channel. No ad spend required. Every piece of content created by the community became a permanent, compounding asset that pulled in the next wave of users for free. For years, this model just worked, but scale eventually put pressure on the very thing that made Stack Overflow valuable in the first place. The strict curation that protected quality started to clash with what newer users expected. To the experienced contributors, Stack Overflow was a pristine reference library, and they defended it like one, closing duplicate questions, removing low-effort posts, keeping the signal-to-noise ratio high. But to a lot of junior developers, that same behavior felt cold, even elitist. They weren't looking for a library, they wanted a real-time help desk, and they bristled when their questions got shut down within minutes of posting. For a long time, the library model won that argument because it was working, and then the ground genuinely shifted. Large language models and AI coding assistants arrived, and they started answering exactly the kind of simple, repetitive questions that had funneled millions of beginners onto Stack Overflow through Google in the first place. The decline wasn't a slow fade. Traffic dropped soon after ChatGPT's public debut in late 2022, and question volume fell sharply through 2024, down dramatically from the platform's peak in the late 2010s. The company responded on two fronts. It cut a significant share of its staff and shifted toward a path to profitability mindset. And, in a move that says a lot about the moment, it struck data licensing deals with some of the very AI companies now displacing its search traffic, while also building AI features of its own. Leadership began loosening the model that had defined the platform for over a decade. adding more open-ended discussion features, more AI tooling, signaling a friendlier, less strictly curated posture. And the veteran curators, the people who had built the reputation system into a functioning quality control army, pushed back hard. Their warning was simple. Strip away rigorous moderation, and the platform drowns in noise. You lose the very knowledge base that made it worth anything. It's a genuinely difficult bind, and it's worth naming clearly. Do you chase the top-of-funnel traffic of beginners looking for quick help, or do you protect the senior contributors who actually produce the high-value content everyone depends on? You can't fully do both. And whichever way you lean, someone who built the platform's value feels betrayed. So what does a story like this actually teach us? First, build an audience before you build a product. Stack Overflow's single most effective acquisition strategy wasn't a launch tactic. It was pre-existing trust, banked over years of blogging. Content can incubate a market long before a product exists. By establishing authority first, the founders gave their eventual product something close to instant product market fit. Second, align your product's architecture with your acquisition channel. The founders knew, going in, that most future traffic would come from people pasting error messages into Google, so they built for exactly that: clear, searchable, well-structured answers. If you know where your users are going to come from, design the product to meet them there. Third, make gamification functional, not decorative. A lot of products bolt points and badges onto an experience just to juice engagement numbers. Stack Overflow's reputation system worked because the points meant something real: moderation power. That turned ordinary status seeking into a free, effective quality assurance workforce. And fourth, be careful about optimizing for engagement over value. When a disruptive technology threatens your traffic, the instinct is to chase broader engagement, more features, more reasons for people to stick around. But if you built a curated knowledge base, diluting it into a generic feed can drive away the very experts who created its most valuable content in the first place. If you built a library, turning it into a hangout might just send the librarians home. Stack Overflow's story runs from a triumphant, engineered launch to a genuine reckoning with a technology that undercuts its original growth engine. It's a vivid reminder of how tightly product and marketing are actually intertwined. The site solved a real, painful problem, but it scaled because its founders had already built and earned an audience, and then designed a product where every single page quietly recruited the next user. The AI challenge doesn't erase that achievement, it tests its limits. And the lesson underneath all of it endures. The best products solve a real problem, but the most durable platforms pair that solution with a community-powered engine, and eventually have to decide, when the ground shifts beneath them, which users they were truly built to serve. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.